Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Nature Live Online. I'm Alison. I'm your host for today. Now, if you're a regular viewer, welcome back. It's great to have you. But if you're new to Nature Live Online, we're an event where we give you a chance to meet some of the scientific staff that work behind the scenes at the Natural History Museum in London. The museum has, of course, opened its doors to the public, and we put lots of measures in place to ensure you have a brilliant and a safe visit. But not all of us can make it to the museum. So every week we're bringing our science and our scientists direct to you at home. Now, the full title of today's talk is I Can't Believe It's Not a Dinosaur. We're going to be finding out a bit more about some of those animals we commonly mistake for dinosaurs, but also what it is that actually makes a dinosaur. And to guide us along the way, I'm going to be joined by scientist Matt Porter. Now, I've got loads of questions for Matt, but as ever, we love to hear from you. This is your chance to ask your questions as well. So don't be shy. Pop any questions or comments you have in the chat. We'll do our very best to answer as many of your questions as we can. But let's meet our scientist for the day. Matt, are you there?
Hello, Alison. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, all excited to talk about my favourite topic.
Me too. Me too. It's great to see you. It's great to have you. Tell us, first of all, what it is that you do at the museum.
So I'm a curatorial assistant at the Natural History Museum, and my projects that I work on are quite varied, essentially. I've done conservation-based work, restorage and fossil preparation and bespoke storage. You can see both myself and my colleague Kieran looking at how the specimen we've just repackaged in acid-free materials is going to go back into the collections. Also, I've done a lot of other joint work across divisions, working in various different collections, from fossil corals and dinosaurs to meteorites and minerals. I present at conferences, and also sometimes I'm lucky enough to go on field work and go out into the field, and that's a picture of me in Morocco.
That's very cool. So you work across all different parts of our collection, get to see all kinds of specimens.
Yes, I do. Everything within the Earth Sciences department, and like I said, minerals, fossils, invertebrates, fossils like trilobites and things like that, right up to big mammals like mammoths and dinosaurs, and things like that.
Fantastic. Now it's those fossil animals that we're focusing on today, and I'm guessing we'll have quite a few dinosaur fans in our audience, our viewers watching today, hopefully. So Matt, what is it you think about dinosaurs that people find so fascinating?
That's a really good question, and I suppose for me, and maybe for everyone viewing, I think there are a number of key things that draw us to dinosaurs. When you think of dinosaurs, you think of animals that were larger than life. They're often considered really, really big, and many of them did get to very large sizes. Many were also very small. There's also that variety. They're extremely diverse, and some of them are really quite scary, like this T-Rex here. So they're big, they're scary, and then there's the mystery behind them, the fact that they're all gone. Why aren't they here? How did they become so successful? And I think those are the three main draws to dinosaurs for, I think, both children and adults.
Absolutely. That's why I love them. But there's often quite a bit of confusion and misunderstanding about dinosaurs, particularly around what is and isn't a dinosaur. For example, we've got an animal here that we're going to show. Flying dinosaurs, right?
Yeah, every time someone says that this is a flying dinosaur, a paleontologist cries. So please try not to make that mistake. Yes, they are often shown in dinosaur books, and they certainly did live at the same time as the dinosaurs, but they are their own separate group. They are pterosaurs, and they are flying reptiles. And the reason that they're own separate group is because they have a number of unique adaptations. So, for example, on here in this picture, particularly on the skeleton, you can see what's called a pteroid bone, and it actually connects to the wrist. And it supports the front membrane, so that membrane in front of the arm that goes from the shoulder to the wrist. The other adaptation that they have for flying is this really, really long fourth finger, which you can see, which supports the actual entire wing membrane. And it's these two features combined that obviously make them very, very well adapted for flying. And they are unique to pterosaurs. Dinosaurs don't have these features.
Yeah, you can really see that fourth finger in that image there, and we can see that wing, that membranous wing. Was it always membrane? Did they have feathers at all?
Well, this is really interesting. So I remember growing up and it just being a membranous wing, but recent research has shown that pterosaurs may have had some form of feathers, and this isn't too surprising, and we might cover this a little bit later when we talk about feathers in a bit more detail, but they are closely related to dinosaurs. They're within the same group as dinosaurs and crocodiles, and it's called archosaurs, but they're their own separate group within that. And kind of think of them as cousins to dinosaurs rather than actual dinosaurs. But the fact that they have feathers shows that they're quite closely related.
Okay, so they're definitely related, and they're incredible pterosaurs, aren't they? They're really, really varied, really diverse, and some of them got to amazing sizes, didn't they?
Yeah, so they're really unusual, and I think that's part of the reason why I like them so much, is that they are just so varied. I mean, here's one, for example, that's quite popular, Quetzalcoatlus, and it's a huge pterosaur, almost the size of a giraffe, and you can see it in the image there. It would have eaten small dwarf sauropods, so quite a menacing creature. But just to look at it, you'd think, oh, it can't fly or anything like that. But research has suggested that it could well have got up off the ground and flown. So I think that makes it even more fascinating. Such an unusual shaped animal could do that.
Amazing animals, but definitely not dinosaurs. So we should probably delve a bit deeper then into what it is that actually makes a dinosaur a dinosaur. How are they different from reptiles like pterosaurs?
So the first thing to notice when you're trying to work out if an animal is a dinosaur is whether its legs are directly underneath the body. So when you look at most other reptiles like lizards and crocodiles, you'll notice that they have what's called a sprawling gait. That means that their legs and arms are directly out to the sides. And you can do this at home if you want, just to put you in the mindset of a crocodile and a lizard. You're just moving your legs and arms like that in a rotating fashion as you crawl along. Okay, so if animals have their legs out to the sides, they are definitely not a dinosaur. Now, having your legs underneath your body is by no means unique to dinosaurs, but it is something that dinosaurs also developed, but in their own unique way. And having your legs directly underneath your body, and you can do this with your arms, you notice that there's a couple of things instantly that the animal would benefit from, and that is it would be taller so it could see further. It would be taller so it could reach foods that other animals possibly couldn't reach. And also in terms of movement, you can have a longer stride, so you're faster, and it also takes less energy to move your legs backwards and forwards, as opposed to, like I said, with crocodiles and lizards when they're moving them around from side to side. So those number of advantages probably helped dinosaurs rise to dominance. But like I said, they are by no means the only animals that do that. Mammals hold their legs directly underneath their body, and some crocodiles at the time of the Triassic were also experimenting with that form of locomotion and movement.
All right, so legs underneath, but that's not totally unique to dinosaurs. So is there anything that is?
Yeah, so what it is actually the way that they do that, the way that they hold their legs underneath their body. Now, if you look at a dinosaur skeleton, and I've got some product placement here to illustrate this point, which I hope you can forgive me, but you can thank the museum shop for this. So here's your typical dinosaur, and you'll notice what they have, instead of having like a cup-like joint in the pelvis, they actually have a hole joint, and this hole goes directly through the pelvis, so I can illustrate this context, right out to the other side. It's called an open or perforated acetabulum, and it basically acts as a joint, and it's made up of the three bones that make up the pelvis: the pubis, the ilium, and the ischium. So that's part one. The second part of it that allows them to hold their legs underneath their body and is unique to dinosaurs is that if I was to take the leg of the dinosaur and hold it to you, you see, if you imagine there's a ball at the top of the femur or the thigh bone. And in many animals, it's at an angle, but in dinosaurs, it sticks out directly sideways, so it's horizontal. And this just allows that ball to fit into that open hole joint that I showed you earlier. Just pop that in there like that. And this allows the dinosaur to hold its legs directly underneath its body in a straight fashion, just like mammals. So it's those two features of the hips and the leg bones that allow them to do that. There are a number of other features that, define dinosaurs, but those two parts are the main things that you can instantly see and unites the whole group, and everyone is agreed on. But you can see there's a couple of other things. There's adaptations in the ankle joints, obviously to support those legs directly underneath their body. They also have big attachments on their arms as well, and a number of bony projections along their neck vertebrae to support, big, thick neck muscles, as well as a number of other things.
So quite a few kind of key defining features. That's fantastic.
But the hips and the legs are the main.
That's the key thing. Let's remember that stance. Not
all in the hips.
All in the hips. Now, Matt, before we move on, we've had a question come in from one of our viewers. I just want to quickly ask that one. So it's from Emily, and she is asking, how do you know there was a meteorite that wiped out the dinosaurs if you don't know where it hit the Earth? Do we know where it hit?
We do.
Yeah.
I can never pronounce the name of the crater, but it's in Mexico. And it took scientists quite a while to find, Emily. It's an excellent question, by the way, because it was only with satellites that they could see half the crater, and the other half was actually in the sea. And another reason that we know that a meteorite hit and ended the dinosaurs' reign, essentially, is that there's a band when you go through the rock layers and you cut down. If you imagine the strata of rocks are kind of like layers of a cake, and the further you go down, the older things are. And when we reach the end of the dinosaurs' reign, there's like a band, like it's a dusty, almost black sort of band, and it contains a lot of radioactive material that we often find in meteorites. And then after that point, there are essentially no more dinosaurs to be found in the newer aged rocks. So yes, it wasn't by far the only factor. There's a number of other variables that contributed to the end of the dinosaurs, but I think that might have been the final nail in the coffin for them.
Absolutely, and we're pretty confident that was a very, very big factor. And just going back to the dinosaurs and their hips, a question from Khalil, one of our moderators. With an open hip socket, did dinosaurs get lots of dislocated hips? That's a great question.
It's a good question, Carol. So I don't believe so. I can't go back in time and actually observe them, although I very much like to. But what they did do, if you look at their pelvis, it's quite a large surface area and lots of grooves. So they obviously had very, very thick thigh muscles that probably held their bones in place. And it was probably, I imagine, quite a snug fit as well, with the cartilage that obviously stops the bones rubbing together and things like that. So yeah, it's I don't think so. I think they're pretty all right. And many of them, like I said, would have been probably quite fast. So yeah, having a feature that would often lead to dislocated leg bones would not be very helpful.
No, not at all. Now, Matt, now that we know what makes a dinosaur, we should probably take a look at some of those animals that we commonly mistake for dinosaurs. So we've got a brilliant example, first of all, Dimetrodon, which is a wonderful animal.
I love this animal.
Yeah, I know I've seen these in children's books about dinosaurs.
Yeah, so this is another one that's commonly shown, but the fact is Dimetrodon is a group of reptiles called plesiosaurs, and they are much, much older than the dinosaurs. That they appeared in the Permian period, which is about 298 to 251 million years ago. And despite their reptilian nature, obviously you can see that they're clearly not a dinosaur because they've got their legs and arms in a sprawling gait, so out to the sides again, instead of directly underneath their bodies. But also, believe it or not, these animals are more closely related to you and I and many other mammals. And I can show you this if we look at their skull and skeletons. So basically, if at home you feel your cheekbones, this is the zygomatic arch, and behind it, you can see on the human skull, there's a hole. So many mammals that have what's called a synapsid condition, they're called synapsids. So this is you, me, cats, dogs, all mammals. And that's, you have one hole behind the eye socket. And that hole is essentially just a space for the jaw muscles to connect from the sides of the skull to the lower jaw. And you can see that in the Dimetrodon skull, they also have it as well. So yeah, they are synapsids, or very, very early synapsids. Whereas if you look at other reptiles like the crocodiles and the dinosaurs, they have what's called a diapsid condition. So they actually have two holes instead of one on the side of their skull and then one further up at the top of their skull.
Okay, so and
that's them apart.
The teeth of our Dimetrodon are quite interesting as well, aren't they?
Yeah, so if you notice also, dinosaurs and crocodiles quite often have the same sort of shaped teeth all the way along their mouths, whereas Dimetrodon is starting to show that kind of differentiated dentition, you know, some molars, that very, very large canine, and then incisors at the front of the mouth. So that's another indication, again, that they are more closely related to mammals than they are other reptiles.
They are amazing animals, though, aren't they? They lived such a long time ago. Do we know very much about their lifestyle? Were they predatory, for example?
Well, the indication would be that due to that very large canine, they are actually predatory, and they were probably one of the largest predators on land at that time. But they are really unusual and really interesting animals. I mean, the most iconic thing is that big sail on their back. Scientists are still relatively unsure why that had that sail, but some have suggested it might have been something to do with thermoregulation and losing body heat, but many have suggested that it's just another form of display, because it's all about mating in the natural world. And obviously if you have a big, impressive, even the colourful sail, it sends a message to other potential mates that you're fit and healthy. So it could well have been used for that.
So let's move forward in time then to an animal that was definitely around at the time of the dinosaurs. In fact, two sets of animals, plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs. Now, found in the ocean, not aquatic dinosaurs, right?
That's right. There is no such thing as swimming dinosaurs, and I know I'm probably going to regret that later on, but bear with me. But the thing to remember is that these are another group of very, very successful reptiles that lived, again, at the time of the dinosaurs, but are very, very well adapted for a life in the sea and the ocean. And you can see what really separates them is if we look at their skeletal features, they've got like a fin or a paddle. And this is essentially made up of lots of little finger bones. And in some cases, like the ichthyosaurs will have an extra finger. That condition is called hyperdacty, and the extra finger bones is called hyperphalangy. Yeah, as you can see here, compared to a dinosaur hand, which is, you know, quite commonly made up of 5 or fewer fingers, like in the case of the meat eaters, 3 or 2, but also 3 bones and then a claw, which is very, very different from these marine reptiles, which spend virtually all their time in the water.
So this is an ichthyosaur. Is it similar for plesiosaurs? They have a similar condition? So
yeah, plesiosaurs have a similar condition. They don't seem to have the extra finger that the ichthyosaurs, like the dolphin-looking reptiles, do, but they do have that condition, hyperphalangy, and you can see that here with the extra finger bones. Just creates a larger surface area for moving water.
Absolutely, and those fins, those paddles, make them incredible swimmers. Do we know how fast they might have been able to swim?
So I don't know this personally, But I would imagine for things like the ichthyosaurs, they were very, very streamlined. And obviously, when everyone looks at them, they say, oh, that looks very, very similar to a dolphin. And if you're living in the same kind of environment, you're probably going to develop similar sorts of adaptations for moving through that environment. That process is called convergent evolution. But yeah, it would seem to suggest that they were probably very, very fast swimmers if they were, very streamlined and had fins and distinctive tail.
Now, Matt, we mentioned that there were no swimming dinosaurs, no aquatic, no marine dinosaurs.
Yep.
You know what's coming next, don't you? I'm going to say the S word.
You're going to say the S word. Spinosaurus. Again, I can't be angry because I love this dinosaur. It's a very specialist dinosaur and kind of a testament again to how varied and diverse dinosaurs were and how successful they were at occupying various different what we call niches or different environments and predating or eating different things. So you can see here, as we've got more skeletons of Spinosaurus, our understanding has been constantly changing from the specimens that have been found in Morocco. It's got a wide, very thick tail, much like a crocodile for moving water. The sail on its back has changed shape as well. It's got that very distinctive crocodile-shaped snout, and it's got quite short back legs as well. But it still has the usual clawed hands and feet. So I would think of it like very similar to crocodiles occupying that same sort of environment. Crocodiles and alligators, whilst they spend a lot of time in water, they can go out on the land as well. So it's not fully adapted for the ocean or the sea. I do have actually a tooth of Spinosaurus that I can share with all of you. This is from Morocco. And you can see it's very conical in shape, which are probably very good for snapping and holding on to slippery prey like fish. So it's probably eating the same sorts of things crocodiles would have eaten. And like I said, occupying that same sort of environment.
And is that a real tooth or is it a...
Yes, that's a real tooth.
That's fantastic.
Tooth. You can see.
Amazing.
Very conical.
Now, we've had a couple more questions come in from our viewers. So we had a question from Aaron related to Dimetrodon and Spinosaurus. Aaron was asking, how closely related are those two, Dimetrodon and Spinosaurus? Are they related at all?
They're not related at all, Aaron.
No.
So it's important to remember that Dimetrodon is more closely related to mammals than it is to the other reptiles, in particular those dinosaurs and the crocodiles and things like that in that archosaur group. So they are very, very separate animals and separated by many, many millions of years as well. So
and we've had a question also from Noah asking about mosasaurs. He's asking, what is a mosasaur most closely related to? Do we know?
So that's an excellent question. It's my understanding the research is still looking into mosasaurs because they're a very, very unique group of animals, but they sit somewhere closely related to both snakes and lizards. So their own little separate group within that clade, essentially, which makes them really, really interesting in of themselves. But they are definitely not dinosaurs again, because you can see they've got fins or flipper-like appendages. They were completely adapted for a life in the water. But yeah, it's still impressive animals as well.
Absolutely, really impressive animals, and a great question. So I'll just do a couple more questions from our viewers before we move on, because we've got a question from Natalie about the Australian cassowary that has a foot like a dinosaur. Is this due to evolution? We're going to come back to this a little bit later on, aren't we? So perhaps we can answer it more fully a bit later. So yeah, watch this space. But it's a really good question, Natalie. But we will come back to that one. Now, we mentioned crocodiles when we were talking about Spinosaurus. So let's very briefly talk about crocodiles, because what's their relationship with dinosaurs? Is there a relationship? When did crocodiles first evolve?
So crocodiles are a little bit older than dinosaurs, and again lived at the same time as dinosaurs, and also amazingly are still around today, which I think is phenomenal. Crocodiles are found in the same group as dinosaurs and pterosaurs. So that group is called archosaurs. So they are more closely related to dinosaurs than, say, other reptiles like lizards and snakes, but they are their own distinct separate group as well. As I said, the crocodiles did some amazing things in the Triassic. They were also experimenting with legs directly underneath their bodies. And then later on, when the dinosaurs rose to dominance, the crocodiles didn't do too badly either. And I think many of you can think of large crocodiles that were capable of eating dinosaurs whole. So they were very, very impressive animals. But a couple of adaptations that set them apart is that if you look at a modern crocodile skull, you'll notice that there's a tube in the top of their roof of their mouth, or the palate, that connects the nostril all the way to the throat, and it allows them to continue to breathe through their nostrils, which are above water, but have their mouths open and not have water go back into their windpipe. So that's one adaptation. And another thing, you might notice that crocodiles have quite a flat skull, and the top part of their skull has an overhang, which allows like a fleshy ear to attach to. And this can also keep the water out of their ears whilst they're stalking their prey in the water. So adaptations for helping them in those like freshwater environments.
And there's, they're these huge reptiles. It makes you wonder how they managed to get through that massive extinction event, how they managed to survive. Do we have any ideas?
So again, it's really interesting, like what animals managed to survive that end extinction. But so crocodiles are cold-blooded, so they don't have to eat quite as much regularly as, say, a warm-blooded animal like, say, dinosaurs or mammals. So that's one advantage. Another advantage that I've heard listed is a behavioral one, actually, and the fact that sometimes when food is plentiful, saltwater crocodiles will actually kill their prey but drag it to the bottom of the river and kind of bury it or hook it onto debris like branches and stuff, and it acts like a refrigerator, so that in lean times when there's probably not so much food around, they can revisit these stores of food. So that might have been another thing that helped them get through that final extinction, but genuinely we don't actually know. I think it's just really interesting. Good question.
And another amazing animal, but not a dinosaur. Definitely not a dinosaur.
Sprawling legs out to the side, not a dinosaur.
Exactly. Look for those signs, definitely. Now, there is one more animal that we want to show our viewers, and I'm quite keen to get them to guess, actually, whether this one is a dinosaur or not. We're going to show you all a skeleton. I want you to guess. Put in the comments, is this a dinosaur, yes or no? So let's take a look at this skeleton. It's an interesting one, isn't it?
It is interesting.
Think about those features, those dinosaur features that we talked about earlier. I mean, it's a tricky one, because there's certain things about this that make me go, no, that's not a dinosaur. But then others that make me think, So I'm intrigued. I'm wondering what our viewers think. I'm hoping and I'm guessing quite a few of them will get this one right. But we'll see. Matt, tell us, can you reveal, is this a dinosaur?
Congratulations, everyone who said this was a dinosaur.
Mostly yeses.
It is a dinosaur. It's a chicken. And if you haven't heard, birds are dinosaurs. We actually call them avian dinosaurs. You'll never look at a chicken the same way again, I can rest assure you of their fierce ancestry. But again, it was all about the hips and the thigh bones. If they have the same features as dinosaurs, that open whole joint acetabulum and that ball coming off of the thigh bone sideways to fit into that joint, but they also have a number of other features as well. We've already been mentioned the foot of a cassowary or a chicken. You'll notice it's got 3 forward pointing claws and 1 backward pointing claw, and it's covered in scales. Again, look at any meat-eating dinosaur like your famous T-Rex and stuff like that, and you'll see the similarity there. They also have hollow bones, which is very common and found in dinosaurs as well. For dinosaurs, hollow bones probably made them lighter so they could run faster in case of meat eaters, or they could get to really large sizes like the long-necked dinosaurs and sauropods. And in birds, obviously, that's helpful for flying and getting them off the ground. They also have feathers, and we found a lot more evidence of feathers in dinosaurs, which I can come on to later. So that's another feature they share in common, as long with laying hard-shelled eggs as opposed to soft-shelled eggs like crocodiles and other reptiles. So yeah, there's a lot of common similarities. And we actually have good fossils that indicate this transition from some of those small meat-eating dinosaurs to birds now. So yeah, birds are dinosaurs. It's true what Alan Grant said in Jurassic Park.
Absolutely. We've got one particularly fantastic fossil in our collection that is on display in the museum, isn't it? Tell us about this one.
So this is a fantastic specimen called Archaeopteryx that was found in about the 1860s. And shortly after, Darwin came up with his theory of evolution. And everyone was like, well, if this is the case, why don't we see transitionary fossils, indicating how animals change into other groups of animals? And then lo and behold, this came along. Huxley, a good friend of Darwin's, was the first to propose that actually birds were related to dinosaurs. And you can see here, it's a fantastic, this is the Berlin specimen, but we actually have the type specimen at the Natural History Museum in our treasures gallery. But you can see here a very reptile-like skull with teeth and a long bony tail, but it's clearly got feathers, like well-developed feathers, which are essentially just modified scales. So yeah, it's a very beautiful and unique specimen.
It's wonderful. And we had a great question that came in a little bit earlier from Zachary, while we're on the subject of feathers. Zachary asked, did any dinosaurs have hair?
So hair is very different in structure to feathers. But interestingly, feathers are made of keratin, the same stuff that our hair is made out of. So they're similar in that sort of respects, but they are very, very different structures. You only find hair in mammals, okay, and feathers are found in birds and dinosaurs.
Good question, though. Good question. While we're on the subject of birds being dinosaurs, there are some scientists, aren't there, that are looking into the idea that you might be able to reverse engineer a bird to show sort of reptile dinosaur-like features. Is that right?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting idea. The Chickenosaurus, as I like to call it, and this is an excellent drawing from Kieran Miles, my colleague. Makes me smile every time. Yeah. But yeah, they are actually trying to do that. So when you look at a bird embryo, like a chicken embryo, and when it's in the egg, you'll notice, and this is the case for all birds, that they actually start developing a bony-like reptile tail. They have like a 3-clawed hand, and they start off with teeth as well, like little sharp teeth in the beak. But then genes turn on during their development, and these features are actually reabsorbed. So the bony tail is reabsorbed, the teeth are reabsorbed, and then it becomes a characteristic beak, also made of keratin, like the feathers, and bone. And then you've also got the 3-clawed hand, which eventually fuses into a bird wing. So scientists are trying to look at turning these genes off to see if they can get something more closely dinosaur-like. Quite an interesting idea.
Yeah. I don't know if 2020 really needs a Chickenosaurus.
That's true, but it swings and roundabouts. If Colonel Sanders markets it right, he could probably get an extra bit of chicken for KFC in that tail. So, we'll have to see. But yeah,
who knows? And we had a lovely question again. It came in a bit earlier from Joseph, that's related to this. Joseph asks, do you think that one day we'll really be able to bring dinosaurs back to life?
Well, that's an excellent question, first of all. And it's an interesting idea. I think there's two things we need to consider. Firstly, the ethical implications of this. Why are we bringing dinosaurs back? And it's okay to say, oh, wouldn't that be cool? But you've got to understand that their environments are no longer around anymore. many of the animals that exist now are very, very different than the animals that were alive then. So what would be the purpose of bringing back dinosaurs into an ecosystem that doesn't really need them anymore? And I suppose the second thing is also, like, scientifically, can we do it? And interestingly, after Jurassic Park, there was a surge of science trying to look at this idea of extracting DNA from amber. And I can say that DNA degrades far too quickly. You're never going to get that sort of what they do in Jurassic Park and link it with frog DNA. And so it's a nice idea, concept, but yeah, it doesn't work in practice. They've also tried getting DNA from the actual bones themselves, but again, it breaks down too quickly. But what they did find, actually, which was interesting, I think, is that they could get some soft tissue like blood cells and other things as well, from T-Rex bones and stuff like that were exceptionally well preserved. So you can get some elements of soft tissue, but yeah, DNA definitely not. So the best option would be to reverse engineer a chicken, but even that is really, really difficult.
And that ethical point is really, really important, isn't it? One of our viewers, Vanessa, has commented, why would you want to reverse engineer dinosaurs? Is this ethical? It's a really important question.
It is an important question, and I don't think, and it needs to be discussed, really. I don't really know, to be perfectly honest. We've got a lot of evidence to support now that birds are descended from dinosaurs, but yeah, whether reverse engineering birds like chickens in order to see these reptilian features will add anything is yeah, it's an interesting question, and scientists and the public are still debating it now. So yeah,
absolutely. And a similar question from Angel. Absolutely, a similar question from Angel, one of our viewers: why not bring back an animal that's recently become extinct because of man? Again, tricky questions.
It's tricky questions again. Like, you could again say, oh, it's our responsibility because we made that animal go extinct. But again, you've got to think about the environment that you're bringing that animal back into. Yeah, there's lots of different variables. You can have knock-on effects. We've seen that before when moving animals just between different countries, and the knock-on effect, like take Australia and bullfrogs and rabbits that have gone out of control because they have no natural predators. Environments do change, and animals do naturally go extinct. That's something that is just inevitable. That's just how it works. But yeah, whether we have a responsibility to bring back those animals is a difficult question, and I think it needs to be looked at a case-by-case basis, I think, is the best thing.
Yeah, we could do a whole Nature Live on this, but that's for another time, I think. Just one quick question from one of our viewers in Sri Lanka. We did touch on this a bit earlier, but did Dimetrodon live before the dinosaurs? They did, didn't they? Long before the dinosaurs.
Long before the dinosaurs in the Permian period, which was around 298 to 251 million years ago. And then dinosaurs came a lot later in kind of like the middle Triassic, and they really became dominant at the end of the Triassic extinction.
It's such a great topic. Dinosaurs, they're amazing animals, but so are many of the animals that we've spoken about today. Dimetrodon, pterosaurs, plesiosaurs, they're awesome animals. Whereabouts in the museum can people see these? Because we've got quite a few, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. So we've got an excellent marine reptiles gallery that covers a lot of specimens collected by Mary Anning, the famous paleontologist. So plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs. We've obviously got a dinosaur gallery. Yeah, these are our marine reptiles. So plesiosaur here. We don't have too many specimens of early pelecosaurs and synapsids, but we do have a gallery called In the Beginning, which takes you through the evolutionary history of life, and that covers a lot of the amazing life that has been on our planet as well. So that's also a really good one to go and visit. And of course, Archaeopteryx, that specimen I showed you earlier, is in the Treasures Gallery and shows some of our key highlighted specimens. And Archaeopteryx is the type specimen as well, so the very first one ever discovered.
Absolutely. So if you can make it to the museum, do go and take a look. Go and head to those galleries. They're absolutely fantastic. If you can't, there's lots of information on our website as well. So go and check out our Discover pages, and you can find out all about these animals as well. We are almost out of time, Matt, but we did have one really brilliant question come in a bit earlier from one of our viewers, Emily, who is interested in becoming a paleontologist and wondered how, if you had any advice, how she could go about that.
Oh, hello, Emily. Yeah, I can completely understand that. I was the same as you, still am. So interestingly, I would say, obviously work hard. Some exams and later like things you can learn in school would be good for a future career in paleontology would be things like learning biology of animals, chemistry to help you understand geology and rocks later on, geography, processes like that, because we often study that sort of thing in the rocks to get a better understanding of these ancient environments. And then when you move on to university, for example, there are actually degrees that you can do in either paleontology or geology. I actually came personally from a biology perspective because I actually like the animals themselves. So I did a biology degree first and then later did what's called a paleobiology master's at Bristol. But there are a number of universities that provide that sort of thing. And the other thing I would suggest is also get some voluntary experience if you can. Work in a museum with curators because they have access to these wonderful collections and do amazing work behind the scenes. So it does work in your favor.
And if you're interested in fossils as well, there's lots of places in the UK you can actually go out and go hunting. You can find fossils, aren't there?
Yeah, so there's actually plenty of examples of that. So you can go down to Lyme Regis and Charmouth, or a bit closer to my parents' home in Folkestone as well. Often looking for ammonites trawling through the beaches is a common pastime that I do, and I never get tired of it, actually. I think it's great fun.
Absolutely. When I go back home to Essex, I go to Walton and I go looking for fossil shark teeth. Loads on the beaches. Absolutely brilliant.
Still looking for fossil shark teeth. I've got loads of ammonites.
I'll swap you some of my shark teeth for some ammonites. Well, Matt, thank you so much for chatting to us today. It's been absolutely brilliant. I have learned so much, so I really, really appreciate it. So thank you. Hopefully we can come and talk to you again at some point, but we will say goodbye to you for now. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to you, our viewers, for all of your fantastic questions. I hope that you enjoyed that as much as I did. If you did, join us again. We're here every Tuesday at 12 and every Friday at 10:30. Check our website, check our social media feeds to find out what's coming up. Do join us again. We would love to see you. But for now, we'll say goodbye. Take care. We'll see you soon.